Okay, here we are again. I'm continuing this series on Maya to Blender and Blender to Maya. Today I'm going to be covering the component modes and modeling tools. So let's jump right into it. So here I am with the blank scene of Maya, and if I create a cube here, remember we can do that just by simply holding Shift right mouse button and creating a cube. And then I can scale this up with R and just uniformly scale it this way. To enter vertex mode, hold right mouse button, and now I can enter my vertex mode and different components. I can hold right mouse button and now go into edge mode as well as face mode. Okay. Now to do that in Blender, we're going to switch over, and here we are with everything. We'll select just so we can start from a blank scene. Press Shift A to create a cube. Now I have this cube here, and if I want to scale this up, I can hit S for size and just scale this up. Now, to go into edit mode, we want to head over to the either modeling tab or just press tab to enter your layout. So I'll just jump over to the modeling tab, and now you can see I can enter and exit modeling or edit mode here, and I can switch components here. You can see them at the top with 1 for vertex, 2 for edge, and then 3 for face. Great, so we're exactly where we want to be. Now the next thing we can look at is, if I go into vertex mode, one of the most important things is snapping, right? So if I press W here to go to my move tool and I want to snap it to this vertice, I can hold V, and as you can see, we're enabling and activating our snapping. You can actually just go into vertex snapping mode, and then that'll just keep you there. I recommend using V for vertex, and then either using middle mouse drag or left mouse button to drag and snap that to other vertices. You have different types of snapping, so you can see I have grid. I can snap to grid, so if I Alt left mouse button to orbit and I want to snap this to the grid, then I can hold X or enable this snapping here, and you can see that it allows me to increment snap here on the grid. You can kind of think of the grid here being kind of a 3D grid that allows you to increment snap as well as other snapping. For snapping inside of Blender, it is located here in the top middle where we have snap. It tells you actually, if you just hover right over, that the shortcut is Shift Tab, which is super nice. Now if you click this open, now you have all of the options of snapping. You want to snap to the increment, the vertex, vertices, and whatnot. So what's nice is if I go into vertex mode and I want to do the same thing in snap, well, if I hold G, you can see that I'm kind of free snapping here. You can actually hold Control and you can see it starts to snap. But what it's doing is it's using the increment snap. So if you hold Control, right? But if I want to switch to vertex mode, if I press G, you can see that I'm not in snap mode yet. But if I hold Control here, so I'll press G and hold Control, you can see that I can snap to that vertice as I get close. Now you can, just like in Maya, enable this snap where now I press G and it'll automatically snap without me having to press anything. Now the next thing I want to look at is pivots. So if I jump back to Maya, Control Z to undo, and if I press Q and then object mode, you can see now that I'm back into the object mode. If I press W, this is the pivot of our object. Now, if I want to change the pivot inside of Maya of this object, you can change this by using Insert. Press Insert on your keyboard, and this now becomes Edit Pivot mode. So I can start to move this anywhere I want in 3D space, and if I press Q to exit and then W, you can see that the pivot has now moved to wherever I want. If I press Insert and I want to snap this to a different component here, I can actually just press V and snap it to this vertice, and then press E for rotate, and you can see it starts to rotate about that object. And if you want to change the space or the world space or local space, you can do that here at the bottom right in your modeling toolkit by going to object, and now you can see I can change that there with the pivot. And there's a bunch of other different ways, like you can change the pivot to component mode, object, world, so on and so forth. So I'll undo that and just set the pivot back here. You can actually, let's say I move it here, and if I press W and I want to put it back, well, you have this center pivot here under your polygon modeling, so you can just simply hit that and that'll center your pivot. If I jump to Blender now and we're looking at how to set this pivot of this object, the way that I found, there could be other different ways, is to leverage this little guy here in the middle. Now, what you're going to do when you first get into Blender is you're probably going to hold shift and accidentally right mouse button because you're used to holding control shift orbiting, right? Just like with alt, left mouse button, middle mouse button, right mouse button. You think control shift is going to do the same thing. And I was constantly moving this annoying little icon, this cursor. This little cursor is essentially, the way that I view it, is your working pivot, okay? So this little orange dot in the middle, that's your object pivot, okay? And if I want to adjust the pivot now to do the same exact thing while holding shift, right mouse button, you can see it'll snap to these vertices because I am in vertex mode. Now, if I'm not in vertex mode, or excuse me, if I'm not in snap mode, so I turn that off, but I make sure that my vertex is my snap too, well then I can hold shift, right mouse button, and then control, and then you can snap the vertices. And this is exactly how I position the cursor. The key thing to understand is I just moved the cursor. I didn't actually change the pivot. You can see the little dot here. So what you can do is head to Object, Set Origin, and then I will do Origin to 3D Cursor. So Origin is just your pivot, and now it moves there. And if I hit Shift Spacebar and grab my Move tool, boom, now I've moved my pivot. And if I Control Shift Z, if I undo redo, so you can see, I can switch this to local. And then if I rotate, now you can see I can adjust this based off the local transformations of the object. Okay, great. So I'll undo and just kind of put that back. And if you want to center the pivot again, under Object, you can set Origin, and you can just do Origin to Geometry, and it'll set it based off the bounding box. Now, I want to delete this because I want to do Shift A, create a cylinder this time. You can see it's based off of the last position of the cursor, so this is a good time to say, so what I can do is press Shift S and just say cursor to world origin and put that bad boy right back at the origin, and I'm good to go. So again, that's Shift S whenever you need that. And I apologize, I'll just turn on the screencast key so you can see that in Blender. Actually, if you know one equivalent that I can use in Maya, let me know. I'd love to have that. Currently, everything that I found doesn't really work that well. So I will head over here and Shift A, create a cylinder. You can see I can change this. So 32 vertices is completely fine. You can change the radius depth, doesn't really matter here. And if I just simply hit scale, just scale that up. And I'll do the same inside of Maya. So I can hold Shift right click and create a cylinder and just scale that up with R. Now, I want to select components here. So in order to do that, if I go into edge mode, I can just simply double click inside of Maya to select an edge loop. If I want to select an edge ring, so essentially the perpendicular or horizontal edges, vertical edges, you select the first vertical edge, select the neighboring edge, and then double click holding shift, boom. You've now selected the ring of edges there. You can also hold shift and then double click to a specific part, so that'll kind of select it up until you get to a specific edge. Or I can go into vertex mode here, and if I wanted to, let's say I marquee select, and then I over selected, right? If I kind of alt left mouse button to rotate around. If you want to deselect these, just hold Control left mouse button marquee select, and we've deselected those. So that's kind of the key way, is just, you can do this in any component mode by the way, is just holding shift, selecting the neighboring face, and it'll select face loops, edge loops, and all that good stuff. And then Control to deselect up to a certain point. Now one thing that's pretty nice is if you hold tab, you see it goes to drag, and you can drag and marquee select here with this, right? Now in Blender, the way that it works, if I go into here, go into tab mode, and I want to select a ring, or excuse me, a loop of edges, Alt left click it. So double clicking is not going to work here, Alt left click will. And if I want to add to selection, then I use Shift Alt, and then you can see that I've selected that loop of edges there. Now if you want to select a ring of edges, in this case, So you can see that if I select this and then I like alt click, it won't select, or shift alt, it won't select the ring of edges. Instead of holding shift, you would hold control alt. So I go to control alt, select the neighboring edge, the parallel edge, and that'll select the face loop, right? So again, to select, or I should say the ring of edges. So to select the edge loop, hold alt, click to add to your selection, shift alt. To select a ring of edges, you holding control alt, and then you can select the ring of edges. It's a little bit weird, especially coming from Maya, but once you got that down, you're good to go. And what's nice, if you want to select this up to a specific path, you can hold control. This actually doesn't work that well, but if you want to select like a path along an edge loop, then you can hold control, and that'll select that loop up until that specific part. So that's super helpful as you're going along. And then if we go back into Maya, one thing that works really well, that I like a lot, is using the transform tools, specific transform tools. So they're transform constraints. So you can see edge slide, surface slide here. In Maya, if you select your components and hold control shift, then middle mouse, you automatically start to slide it along there. So I'm going to cheat here because I haven't showed modeling tools, but I'll just show you what I mean by beveling. And then I will add in a, multi-cut here. So if I want to slide this edge, actually I'll just use this edge so you can see more clearly. I'll double click this edge here. And if I want to slide it along this edge without having to manually move and scale, you can slide it along the normal of this edge by holding Control Shift. So press W for move tool, Control Shift middle mouse button, and there you go. You can see that it's sliding along that edge, which is super nice, right? And if I just quickly add in an edge loop like this, if I hold Control, middle mouse button, drag, I can move it on the normal. And I use these all the time, So again, I can move it up on the normal, and then hold Control Shift with edge slide. So edge slide it back with Control Shift middle mouse button. Move it on the normal with Control middle mouse drag. In Blender, what I can do is the same thing. So I'll just cheat a little bit and just do a quick bevel here, just so you can see this, and then we're going to go into modeling tools in the next video. So if I cut in with this, I just want to make sure you see this in application. So I cover kind of all face selection and transform tools. So if I want to edge slide this, you go G, G. So G and then G again. Now we can edge slide this here, which is super nice. I haven't found like a great normal. Sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't, but to move on the normal, I used Alt S, and that moves it on the normal. You can see it doesn't give me exactly the same type of result, but it still works pretty well and gets me by for most things that I need. So to edge slide, GG, GG to slide, and then to move on the normal, we'll hold Alt S, and we just move it in on the normal. Great. So that is where I wanted to end it today. I know I wanted to do some modeling, but this was plenty amount of time. So in the next video, we're going to jump right into edit mode and then right into modeling. Also, if you haven't checked it out, be sure to look at my Patreon, where I have a bunch of different tiers in here, including a mentorship tier, and you get access to all of my free source files along with the Patreon, as well as some custom tutorials that I'll be posting pretty soon. So to support the channel, be sure to check that out, and I'll see you in the next video.